officially live. I'm so excited to dive into another pre-symposium panel as we lead up to our executive symposium in Houston on April 23rd on the topic leading change through experimentation, building a culture that adapts. So, if you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, oh man, that sounds like an interesting topic, come to our executive symposium in Houston. We're hosting the event over at McLaren. So if you like cool cars, we'll be doing it over there. What we do in our pre-symposium panels is we bring three leaders who are going to be at the executive symposium together to share their insight, their thoughts, their perspectives on, yeah, more or less the topic itself. How do they build a culture that adapts? How do they drive experiments in their organization? And really, how do they get their team to be malleable and successful when we're in an environment where there's just so many different changes going on in the business world. So, anyways, we've got three great leaders with us here today. We've got Rupesh, we've got Dan, and we've got Kim. Rupesh, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Rupesh, and I'm founder and CEO of Argod, based out of Houston, Texas. We are online growth engine for the consumer goods brand. So we essentially work with brands, even buy their inventory and sell their inventory online across the board. And that's our specialty. Like we do international, we do all kinds of categories and everything. We have been in business for 18 years and have been growing, profitable, and bootstrapped. Thank you.
Of course. Dan, how about you?
Yeah, Dan Durkin, CTO for Blue Sky IT Partners. So connecting technology and business needs. Previously, I was CIO for Yes Prep Public Schools. So going from inside the house to outside of the house to helping organizations succeed.
Amazing. And then Kim, how about you?
Hello, everyone. I'm the head of client success at Offsite. We plan offsites for mostly remotely based companies, and we have an online marketplace for people to be able to build their own marketplace or their own offsites. So I lead kind of the team that does the end-to-end planning services. I've been in events for the last 15 plus years on kind of the tech corporate side of things. I'm also the mother of three young children, so have that fun element. And yeah, I'm excited to learn from everyone else. I'm in a growing startup, so like what we've done so far has been working, but I'm excited to learn from other people and yeah, learn how to grow and adapt.
Love it. And I'm Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder and CEO of Ambition in Motion. At Ambition in Motion, our vision's a world where the vast majority of people are excited to go to work. When they are there, their expectations meet reality, and when they come home, they feel fulfilled. And we believe that starts with leaders because leaders create the experiences employees have while at work. And so we create technologies and communities to empower leaders to be their best selves for their teams. And one of the ways that we build community is through executive symposiums. So let's dive right in. Topic is leading change through experimentation, building a culture that adapts. I was thinking about it this morning, and I know this is going to be like an interesting offshoot of adaptability, but I want to talk about incentives. I want to just like get right into the meat and potatoes because I think there's this interesting concept of when we build our business, especially when we're small, it's really easy to create incentive plans and then adjust incentive plans when we realize, like, oh, shoot, we weren't incentivizing the right behaviors. But eventually, as we get bigger and as we add more people to our organization, the gap between the CEO and the individual contributors, it widens. And ultimately, we oftentimes will set up really well-intentioned incentive plans and structures, and we'll set up really well, we thought a lot about it, but we thought this is how people would behave, and unfortunately, it leads to sometimes consequences, especially as it pertains to the organization. Oftentimes, we'll see a lot of times individual departments where they're hitting their own individual department goals and metrics, but as a business that's struggling. I'll give an example. Somebody I met with recently leads software development for a large Fortune 500 company, and he is incentivized to make sure that the software is the best for their customers moving forward. Well, some of the overwhelming feedback that they're getting is that they're running too many software updates too frequently. And so the customers are like, stop with the software updates, stop with the software updates, we're good. But the CTO has a comp plan that says unless like he must the software team must put new software development updates every 2 weeks. And if they don't, he misses out on his bonus. The idea behind it, in theory, is great, that your software is not going to get stale, that you're going to constantly be updating, all that sort of stuff. But if the customers are saying stop making software updates, you kind of put yourself in this weird position where you're like, maybe we put in place the wrong incentive plan, and maybe we need to revise this. So, anyways, that's just like one example that I'm just coming up with that I've observed recently. But I'd be curious to know, when we talk about this concept of incentives, when we talk about how can we put our team in the best position to thrive and adapt, I'm not necessarily even asking what are the best incentive plans. I'm really asking, how do we communicate effectively when we realize we made a mistake on our incentive plan and that we need to update that incentive plan? Because it can be really easy for our people to become wedded to this idea of, oh, well, if I hit this metric or I hit this number or I hit this KPI, then I'm going to get my full bonus. I'm going to get a raise at the end of the year. All these things are going to happen to me that are going to be great. But maybe those metrics, in fact, they were wrong. Somebody made a mistake when it came to creating the incentive plan. So I know it's a pretty juicy, beefy kind of way to get started on this topic, but I'd be curious to know, what have you found to be an effective way to audit the incentives that your organization has? And then two, update said incentives when you realize there might be some misalignment. Who wants to go first? Jump in, Rupesh.
Yeah, I think, okay, we have faced those challenges before, and one thing that I distinctly remember has worked very well is to actually map out old incentive to the new incentive. Okay, say, I mean, in the examples you gave, that hey, like I mean, I'm releasing software fast enough, but that makes customer unhappy, and say I want to move my metrics from number of releases to perhaps number of like customer feedback. It is, as a leader, it is my responsibility to show them that look here, this was your incentive for releasing every version of the software. But now if you get each one of these feedback, work with the customer more closely and understand what they want rather than more software, perhaps you will get the same incentive or more, just only if we can adjust this. And that has worked well for us because that mapping is important, is my understanding.
Dan, Kim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm sorry, where are you going? Yeah, so when I look at incentive program, I think of the fact that it's an overhead cost. So the question is, how do you want it to apply into the business? Are you trying to drive sales revenue? Do you want shareholder value? Do you want to build a different culture and team? So the incentive plan should change. I don't know that I agree that I would crosswalk it to the previous incentive plan, especially if I was trying to do something different. If I was trying to grow the organization, or I have a toxic culture and I want to unify the team, or I need shareholder value, increase revenue. I think that's where the incentive plan becomes really focused, right? And say we're all either in it together, or we need more revenue, or the revenue we're getting needs to be more profitable. Not all dollars are made the same way and have the same value, right? And so when I think of that, then I take it apart on, is it more sales? Is it more operational effectiveness? Do we look at the cultural? We're building the right skills, the right people, right seat. Where does that incentive plan, not just a salary, kind of hit different in order to push you and pull you a different way? So I wouldn't want to change the incentive plan more than yearly, but at least adjust it quarterly, and then change the narrative yearly to map where the organization is going. But it also depends on where you're sitting, right? If you just did a massive acquisition, then you got to make the pivot, right? Things like that. Go ahead, Ken.
So I mean, my role is more in kind of the customer service industry, and we had kind of two competing goals. One, we were trying to increase the revenue that we earn from commissions from our vendors and venues. But then we also promise our clients that we save them, X amount of dollars, and we pay for ourselves. And so my team was asked to use more of our partners to earn our company more commission but also like those partners don't necessarily give our clients the best deals always. Like we can't promise that. And so there was a conflict like in like what goals they needed to meet. So we kind of adjusted in that like we were able to grow our marketplace more by having our client success leads do sourcing and then loop in our marketplace team to ask for commissions instead of kind of only working with, you know, like partners that we've already communicated with. So we were able to build on more partnerships with companies that were able to still give our clients the best deal. So we kind of adapted that way. Yeah, like I guess that kind of goes a bit to Dan of like what is the ultimate like goal you're trying to achieve. And I guess like we had a conflict there.
No, I love that. And I love that, Kim, you gave a personal example of that. How did you and or your fellow leadership team approach the rest of the team to say like, hey, we messed up. Like we thought this is how we thought it would go. We realized that we've kind of got some friction incentives here that like kind of go against each other. Did they say that they messed up? Like what was their approach to updating and adjusting the incentive plan?
We definitely have like a very like a culture of candor where like it's okay to make mistakes and like admit them. And so like we often like we have a very horizontal structure and we get feedback from the team. Like everybody's opinions are very valued. So we do make updates pretty quickly. Like we're more in the startup phase. And so like it's not a big deal to admit that we need to pivot and quickly. So yeah, so there wasn't any shame around it. It just was like, hey, is this working? Oh, it's not. Like, what do you guys think is the right answer? And we just get everybody's buy-in and then we reroute.
I love that. And I think keeping and maintaining that culture of candor is probably critical for most organizations. The big issue that I observe a lot of companies get to is when they're out of the startup phase and then they're into the like medium business. And we've got like, there's more of that gap between the executive team and the individual contributors. That's where sometimes we'll see like outside hires come in. Sometimes we'll see like the board start to form and there are investors on the board. And there's these like interesting pressure points that people feel that they didn't necessarily feel in the early stages because the stakes weren't super duper high. They're much lower right now. And then once you get bigger, the stakes, I don't know, they feel like they're bigger, they're heavier, whatever it may be. And you see some bizarre behaviors where people are looking at, oh, this was my idea. This is how I'm going to change the whole business. And if it works, then I'm going to get all the glory and everyone's going to think of me as this major change agent and how amazing I am. How do you maintain that culture of candor as organizations get bigger, as they bring in outside people that have come from big organizations and come with lots of salary, and maybe they have these expectations that they're going to change the whole company and all these sorts of things, or boards where they've invested in and they've got these expectations to achieve this level of profitability? How do you go about recalibrating the candor in an organization when it feels off? Does that question make sense?
Yeah.
Go for it, Kim.
I don't know if I have the answer. Honestly, like this is kind of an area that because yeah, we are kind of moving to that teenage stage of being a company. And like in the past 2 years, I've grown my team from 3 people to 20 people. And I'm learning like we still have that culture, but I feel the growing pains of like I need to maintain that as we scale. And I'm seeking to like learn from people like Dan or Rupesh that have done that. So I don't know if I have the right answer.
Yeah, I would say that candor, or I would always use conflict. You need to have a tighter room so you can have that feeling of safety for the vulnerability in order to have the candor and conflict. Because if you challenge somebody in a large room, you're going to get much different results than if you have a little bit tighter room and everybody knows each other, or at least has some kind of ground rules to it, like this space is, that chat house rule or etc. Because yeah, personalities get bigger as situations get bigger. So I would definitely recommend creating the space and having a series of small rooms that are repeatable to have that kind of candor or that conflict in a constructive way, because emotions will flare. They are humans, right? Most of them. And you will get at least, let's say, mixed results or crazy, somewhere between those two. If you go a little bit too aggressive, I've seen some executives try and push a one-way candor. Most people will retreat. Most people will quiet quit. They'll back up because it's just not in their best interest, right? If they don't have the rank or the support or influence, right?
Rupesh, how about you?
Yeah, I think one is I usually take, I mean, it's a good what I learned from Dan and Kim, but also what I do is I usually take I try to shift ownership to either up or down when I have to have a hard conversation and candor, because somewhere giving them rope that, like, look, you may not be 100% responsible for it, uh, kind of changed conversation many a times, because if the underlying tone remains that you are responsible, uh, because usually those hard conversations are about some shortcomings or failures, and I usually say that, okay, let's talk about your team, or let's talk about me as a manager or leader. What could I have done different? And then suddenly they start talking their mind, has happened. So sometimes, yes, giving them cushion of not making them 100% responsible. And then eventually, like, yes, after a few minutes, or like eventually they may come back and realize that I could have done this as well, because I'm now being very candid that what I could have done different. And that's one way it has worked in the past.
Yeah, well, I mean, Rupesh, I gotta call you out a little bit. You're the
Sure.
CEO of your company. You
Yeah.
know, for better or for worse, regardless, people are gonna treat you differently because you're the CEO of your company. Like, we gotta acknowledge that fact that objectivity diminishes the higher anyone goes in any organizational hierarchy, and you sit at the top.
Agree.
So, like, I get this concept of like, hey, let's sit people down and like let's have a candid conversation. But I think the question I have is like, what does that look like in a practical sense? How often are you admitting metaphorically egg on your face when you've made mistakes?
It's tough. Another one, you're absolutely right. Another one that I usually sort of preach a lot about is what does the data says. Hey, I did try my best, but if like if someone comes and says I tried my best, and but the data shows if the data shows that we have had a degrowth of say like 20%, then that there is no easy escape from that. Or I think, yes, it's flight. It is much harder to explain away data.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's
That's
fair.
how I think about it.
Yeah. Well, okay, on that point, and this is something that Dan, you discussed a little bit. So when I brought up this concept of incentives, you mentioned what is the goal? What is the problem to be solved? What is the goal that we need to have? And this topic, this symposium topic of leading change through experimentation, building a culture that adapts, I think that's at the core of adaptability. Because when I see an organization become, or really people within an organization become so wed to their core beliefs or their core, this is how I do things and this is how we've always done it, that is when you kind of put yourself in a position to become obsolete and outdated and just overall just not useful to the organization anymore because you've clearly decided you were going to take a stake, stick it in the sand, and said, I will change no more. And business and life changes. And so the question I have is, how do we flex that muscle, especially for a team where they've not changed a lot, where they've just kind of been counted on to do the same thing, steady Eddie, day in and day out. This is what I do. This is how I do it. How do you go about keeping people sharp, keeping people aware, and just keeping people open, really, to the changes that might come their way?
Yeah, I would backtrack a little bit and go, I don't think incentive plan would be the right tool I would use. I would look at like a portfolio change, and that's where I'm looking at the people, the skills or talent that you have, the seats that they're fitting in, and then also the cultural value, right? And that builds the team dynamic. So by cutting that apart and rebuilding what you want this new transformation or new product or whatever you're doing that you want to make different, you need to set the stage of what is different, what is successful going to look like in that space. What are those new seats going to look like? And then who can move where? Playing a little bit of that game of who's going to sit in what spot on what bus. That is going to be real difficult to do an incentive plan on, but that'll give them a cross training, a learning experience, a changing title, rebranding opportunity. If there was any sort of rift between people in different groups, you could kind of fix those problems too. So you can change a lot of those dynamics while kind of promoting people in different lights and spaces as being kind of the incentive. And you can do it sometimes without even paying them more money. A lot of times people just want to see that people see them, and they can learn something different and grow and have that opportunity. So I'd always try and go on the more the promote side, but also that way you can also fix other situations, because trying to take the same people in the same seats to do something different, that's a real tough ballot. That's a challenge right there. I don't know that you're going to be as successful with dynamic change as you want to be. Right.
So hold on a second. Are you saying that somebody who's been in the same seat for a while,
Yeah.
you don't see them making the change or adaptability happening?
Not with an incentive plan, and not with just doing the same job, but somehow differently. It's a tough ask. If you don't change the environmental variables, um, it's tough for people to make a large change like that and to do that in a larger setting. Right.
Kim, Rupesh, what are your thoughts on that?
Um, I so yeah, I mean essentially my team is event planners, and for a long time we kind of had the perspective that like their roles were to like handle event logistics, and um we realized that we needed my team to really like step up and be more like thought leaders and strategic partners to our clients. And that's what they were expecting, and we weren't always delivering it. And so kind of the leadership team had talked about, well, like, we need to hold my team more accountable to like doing all these SOPs and making these changes. But like I knew, kind of to Dan's point, like expecting them to have like the same job but like with more responsibilities or more expectations on them is like a hard ask. And so again, like we kind of had this like candor. I wanted everybody's buy-in to like making this change. So I surveyed my whole team. I went through like each SOP, and I basically gave them immunity on like tell me on a scale of 1 to 5 how much you are following kind of our SOPs on all of these things. And if you aren't doing it, I know there's a friction point, and we need to fix it. Like there's a problem with our system if you're not following it. Like it's either too hard or it's not right. And so I got honest answers, and then we all went through like we had like a like basically virtual retreat for 2 days where we like went through each step and we got everybody's buy-in on like how do we level up our whole department together. And yeah, we created this offsite way. And it like everyone felt very motivated by it. Like I brought in like, some professional development speakers and everyone's like very motivated. And yeah, there wasn't an incentive, like their job titles didn't change, but like they're excited to like, I don't know, be a part of this like new initiative.
No, I love that. Rupesh, do you have anything to share on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I follow Kim and share an experience. I mean, at one point, um, we acquired almost 15 companies with different consumer brands, not one point, over a period of time. And when we add new team members, and we ask them to fix listings. Now, these guys, I mean, like usually they come from from the mindset that listing is the least important thing, or that is something that someone with the less experience than them should be taking care of it. And then I had to kind of, I mean, we had to sort of underline that in the online selling, listing is everything. That's where rubber meets the road. And that's where all the success, I mean, that's where the success, all failure is. And we kind of actually picked some examples of the success and failure from the past. And we show them a consistency that, like, a how good listings, often average product is better than the average listing of a good product. And that is how I think they turned around. They sort of understood the deep meaning of it. And but like in now, I mean, they're doing much better because now they're aligned. Their thought processes are in line with what we want them to do.
This is interesting. If I'm hearing all three of your situations right, it sounds like it's not necessarily the incentives that are off, but it sounds like what's more critical is explaining the why to a much more elaborate degree than maybe what we had been explaining it towards. Kim, even like hearing your story, it sounds like, your event team went from like order takers to like thought leaders. And that's a big transition because I don't know, when I think about event planning, like order takers, I just think of that Office episode. Does anybody see the TV show The Office? So
Definitely.
he puts uh Phyllis in charge of the events now, and he's like, Phyllis, I need an anti-gravity machine. And she's like, what? He's like, Phyllis, I need an anti-gravity machine. And so she calls the event rental company up and she's like, my boss has asked me to get an anti-gravity machine. The lady on the phone's like, I have antidepressants. She's like, sure, I'll take it. So, long story short, the point I'm making here is, or just the comment really is just getting your people to understand the why is critically important because Kim, I would imagine in your scenario, you would probably some event planners who are very competent, very comfortable at being a thought leader. And you probably had others that were maybe newer, fresher to the industry, and they were like, cool, tell me what you want and I'll make it happen. And like I can take an order. And it's like, no, they need to lean on us to suggest what they're doing because they maybe have never done an event before and they're
Yeah.
leaning on our expertise. And so yeah, I would imagine that was probably something that was not easy, but like having a process and a protocol is huge. And so it makes me think of a question because I see this all the time. And what I see all the time is scenarios where that when there's struggles with it, the leadership will say things like, my team lacks initiative. They just don't know how to take initiative. But initiative is a fluffy word. There's no actual clear, like, initiative is too generic and way too presumptive. There's not like clarity as to what initiative actually looks like. And some people don't want to say like, oh, I don't want to be a micromanager and I don't want to have to like spell it out for them. But it's like if you're frustrated at the lack of initiative that your team is partaking in, or rather lack thereof, uh, you probably need to spell it out for them because it's obviously not that clear. And so how how do you go about auditing and adjusting, especially behaviors that maybe are a little fluffy, where they're not like some people do them really well because maybe they've had some past experiences that were like, oh, this is my process for how I go about doing this, versus other team members where if they've never had that process or structure in place, they might they might flounder because they just have no idea what success looks like. Dan, you're muted. Now Dan's off camera and muted. Uh, But Dan, whenever you figure that out, but yeah, Kim, Rupesh, what are your thoughts on that? Like Kim, that's kind of more towards you because I find this like what you're describing to be very fascinating. And I think like a lot of teams do this, whether I see this in sales teams where, a sales manager is like, oh, my account executives aren't having enough touch points. And it's like, how many touch points should they have? They're like, well, I don't want to define it for them, but they need to close this much business. And it's like, well, closing business is a lagging indicator. Touch points are a leading indicator. And if you don't want to tell them how many touch points they should have, you
Mhm.
can't really be that frustrated when they don't have enough touch points
Mhm.
if you have an expectation as to how many touch points they should have. And I think would imagine would go from being an order taker in the event space to being a thought leader of like, cool, this is like the newest, latest, and greatest, and whatever. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I we try very hard from the interview process through our like culture onboarding, the whole thing to like really push uh extreme ownership. Is that I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Um I mean, I don't know if it goes to the point because yeah, like you don't always need to like spell out every like you need to reach out to them on this day every week, or like you want them to feel like they can manage their own job. And like I guess I like we try our best to empower them to feel like they can. I guess with like a couple of different things. Like one, like we lift them up, we celebrate them. Like we celebrate especially when they do take extreme ownership, so they know that they can like continue to do that. We also like, again, I'm in startup life, so it's definitely different once you grow bigger, but like we kind of also have a company of like ask for forgiveness, like do something, try something. If it breaks, sorry, like we'll try it again. So we have a lot of trust in our team. And I think even when if they start to go down the route of like expecting more direction, we try to just empower them instead of like give them the rule book so that they know how to do it. I don't know. We kind of, yeah, I don't know if that that was the answer you were looking for, but yeah,
That was the
like,
thing. This is
Yep.
I asked this question because it's not it's not an easy question to answer.
yeah.
Like this is why a lot of companies are challenged with this is because and that's why I ask these questions is because it's like, cool, you're not alone, and I think a lot of people are going through that, and it's like a fluffy gray area of like how much structure do we give versus how much. Okay, I've got a personal example here because it happened recently. So I have a 1-year-old baby, and I took him to swim class for the very first time on Sunday. And I'm in this swim class. It's this pool, and there's different age groups. We're in like the youngest age group and that sort of stuff. And the instructor has like it's got to be this maybe 18-year-old kid who's like teaching babies how to swim and stuff like that. And there's a very clear protocol that he is there to follow. And it's like he sings a song, but this is a loud pool. You can't hear anything. And he's singing this song about goldfish or whatever, and I can't hear a word of what he's saying, but I know this is like his mandatory, he must sing the song. Like he must do that. And it's kind of defeating the purpose, but I'm like, I kind of get it. They want to cheer up these kids. They want to get them excited. I see the theory of it, and the only reason why I knew he was singing was because he's like putting his fingers along the words and like, but you can barely hear it. I mean, it's a loud pool area. Point being is like that's an example where I'm like, that's a very clear process they're making him follow. I kind of get why he does it. It seems superfluous in this moment, but I guess if there was not that high touch point of, trying to cheer up the kids, maybe it wouldn't go as well. I don't know. But anyways, that's my example of very recently that I was thinking of.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's such a difficult thing for people to go from a vision and a why to have that clarity to where people can digest it and be operationally effective. Like the extreme ownership is good, but it never really lands well unless people can get that clarity of
Mhm,
understanding. Like
mhm,
people want to own their spaces, but it's hard to hear why they should do something different, why it's going to achieve this other result, other than what is in their purview. And as you add these layers, that's where the challenge is can you get the cohesion on the back end to match the clarity that you thought you gave from this
mhm,
wonderful vision? And I
mhm,
think that's the challenge, but it's also an awesome thing if you can empower those people. But a lot of times you can't, and that needs to be something that is just a tough understanding for people to have is that, hey, this other person has this vision, and no, we don't know how to actually action it. And there's going to be a variance there. And I think that variance is where a lot of people miss it, right? Because they get frustrated, they'll fire the people, they'll hire new people, you get consultants in, but that variance of how to get the clarity from people, right? Of how did you receive that message? Where are you going to action that? How are you defining success from that direction and that vision that we gave, right? That kind of third loop a little bit because once it goes to action, that's where the wheels come off the bus and random things occur, right? And people get frustrated and angry, and they don't feel like they have that vehicle to bring it back uphill and go, your vision was terrible. Your clarity was awful. Like I'm a part of the mission of the org, but that half circle was just awful for me. And a lot of times we don't create that vehicle, right?
Real quick, Dan, because that's a really fascinating point. What you've highlighted, I think if I'm hearing you right, is that sometimes leaders become impatient.
Oh,
And to your point, like they might just fire everybody because like I've got a bunch of incompetent poops. They're the worst. They just
true.
don't understand it. They don't get it. And are you suggesting that instead of the people being incompetent poops, that maybe that leader didn't take enough time to fully make sure that their people fully digested. Like some people just be like, yeah, for sure, because you're the boss. Like kind of like Rupesh, what I was saying before, of like objectivity diminishes the higher you go in any organizational hierarchy. Like you don't want to look like a ding dong, so you just tell your boss, like, for sure, I got it, boss, thumbs up, but you don't have it. You have
Yeah,
no idea what's
I'll
going on.
take it a step even worse and put my name on it. I have stood in front of a large group of people, angry at them for not paying attention, not following the SOPs that I partially wrote that were over 70 pages, not understanding why they didn't deliver exactly the way I wanted, right? I wrote it, but who is going to read all of these new communications that are super lengthy, that are super deep, that are conflicting to what they're doing today? Right? Nobody held their hand. Nobody walked through how they should make the change. Right? The expectation was here's this awesome new set. Go. Pivot. Go. These people are just the wrong people. Instead of looking at the fact of what I was doing, right? Which is I was just putting a huge encyclopedia on people and expecting them to have different definitions of words.
So if I'm going to come up with a practical application of what you're saying, Dan. If I'm hearing you right, and you're a leader watching this right now, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, cool. I'm frustrated currently with my team and their ability to follow the instructions or guidance that I've been sharing, and they're just not doing it. If I'm hearing you right, what you're saying and suggesting is that first off, I need to take an introspection and look at myself and what clarity and communication style I've been deploying this with. One, and then two, I need to take the time to ask them individually to reiterate it back in their words what I'm asking them to do. Because unless I have gotten their clarity versus just a thumbs up, but an actual explanation from them as to why we're doing this, why this is important, and what this means for the business, I shouldn't feel comfortable or confident that it's going to be followed the way I want it to be followed because I have not gotten that confirmation from them. Is that correct? Dan, I think Dan's
And
tech is up. But yeah, Rupesh, jump in.
and if I can fill in, maybe not to disagree or good to disagree, but where is this higher slow and fire fast saying comes in, right? Because a lot of time, yes, when we face failure with people, a lot of time it's very easy to take a blame that hey, maybe I didn't explain it well, or maybe I was not clear enough. But to what extent? And frankly, I mean, over period, perhaps we have hired 5,000 people in and out after attrition and all of that. What I realized that this it is a very rare event when someone actually changes. Okay, um, like as they say, your attitude determines your altitude, right? I mean, yes, I mean, I would love to live in this happy, um, wishful thinking that hey, I changed or I influenced people or stuff like that. And but frankly, I feel that when I'm leading up same like I mean when I'm coaching or when I'm saying same thing to 10 people and out of 10 maybe 6 gets it, 4 don't. I think what are the chances that those four will come along? I mean, because the message is same, in the I mean expectations are same, but I've seen that there are some. I mean, some people who have. I mean, just because they are hired into our organization doesn't make them some sort of a saint or superhero, so to speak. Like, I mean, so maybe I'm little impatient from leadership perspective, but I've rarely seen people changing their trajectory.
Very interesting. Well, Kim, Rupesh,
That's
Dan, this has been a great pre-symposium panel. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground today. I feel like we've hit some really good points. If you're watching this and you're like, I would like to meet these three great leaders, come to the Executive Symposium on April 23rd. I'll post the link in the comments of this video on how to RSVP. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing you all there. Topic is leading change through experimentation, building a culture that adapts.